The automatic camera clicked as Major Robert Cowboy Stout's F-6F Hellcat cruised at 8,000 feet over Peliolu, September 12, 1944. His orders: photograph the northern airfield and return to USS Hornet. Intelligence said it was abandoned. Then he looked down. The field was packed. Mitsubishi Zeros, Nakajima bombers, fuel drums, ground crews, at least 40 armed planes. 3 days from now, 28,000 Marines would land on Peleliu. Waiting for orders would mean disaster. Stout checked his guns. 6 50 cal Brownings, 2,400 rounds, about 12 seconds of fire. Not enough to shoot every plane, but more than enough to start a chain reaction. He made his choice. Stout circled higher, studying the airfield below. The Japanese had made a critical mistake. Aircraft packed too tightly, fuel drums exposed. One precise strike could trigger a chain reaction. He ran the numbers in his head. 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns, 2,400 rounds. 12 seconds of sustained fire, enough to ignite a massive firestorm, not enough to take out each plane individually. Below, ground crews scrambled, unaware of the danger above. Zeros gleamed under the sun. Nakajima bombers lined up for launch. 3 days until the Marines hit the beaches, and yet, in these moments, Stout realized he could decide the fate of thousands. He thought of Tarawa, of bombers strafing landing craft, of Marines trapped on open beaches. Every second mattered. Hesitation could cost lives. Decision made, he pushed the throttle forward. The Hellcat accelerated, engine screaming, trees blurring below. At 2,000 feet, he leveled off, heading straight for the northern row of aircraft. 12 seconds of fire could change the course of the battle. Stout lined up on the northern row of aircraft. His 6 machine guns roared to life, tracers stitching the tarmac like lightning. The first Zero shuddered under the impact, fuel spraying from ruptured tanks. He adjusted aim, firing into a stack of fuel drums between 2 bombers. The drums erupted in a massive fireball, flames leaping 50 feet into the air. The shockwave rocked his Hellcat, but he held steady. The fire spread quickly, engulfing nearby aircraft. Each explosion fed the next, a chain reaction Stout had calculated perfectly. Ground crews scattered in panic, unable to save the planes. Anti-aircraft guns finally opened fire, but Stout was already climbing, weaving to spoil their aim. Tracers arced past the canopy, some punching through the tail section. Warning lights flickered, but the engine held. Below him, nearly half the northern row burned uncontrollably. Thick black smoke rose into the sky, marking the start of a disaster the Japanese hadn't anticipated. Stout banked hard right, gaining altitude to circle back. Below, the northern row of the airfield was a river of fire. Nearly 20 aircraft burned, flames devouring the tarmac, smoke spiraling into the sky. He checked his ammunition, roughly half gone. The southern end of the field still held at least 20 more planes, untouched and fully armed. Anti-aircraft gunners were tracking him now, firing steadily, tracers slicing through the air like angry hornets. Stout's mind ran through his plan again. He had seconds to decide: retreat and save his Hellcat, or dive back into the inferno to finish the job. 3 days from now, Marines would land here. Delay meant hundreds of deaths. He rolled inverted, diving toward the southern aircraft. Tracers zipped past as he weaved left and right, never holding a straight line. Metal shuddered under impact. Control surfaces rattled. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit, but Stout remained focused. Every shot counted. Every maneuver could save lives. Stout dove toward the southern end of the airfield from a new angle, banking low over the jungle canopy. The Japanese anti-aircraft fire intensified immediately. Tracers streaked past him like angry snakes, and 20mm rounds thudded into the Hellcat's tail, rattling the fuselage. Trees blurred below as he weaved violently, never holding a straight line long enough for the gunners to get a clean shot. Every second counted. Stout's remaining ammunition was precious, about 6 seconds of sustained fire. He aimed at the southern bombers, firing bursts into fuel tanks, control surfaces, and a nearby fuel truck. The truck erupted in a violent explosion, flipping a bomber onto its back. The secondary explosions were catastrophic. Ammunition crates detonated, aircraft ordnance cooked off internally, and the fire raced through the tightly packed southern row. In less than a minute, the Southern aircraft were engulfed. Black smoke and roaring flames shot dozens of feet into the air, visible for miles across the island. Ground crews ran, shrieking and panicked, abandoning all attempts to save the planes. Each detonation seemed to echo Stout's earlier calculations. His gamble was working perfectly. The inferno below was a monstrous chain reaction, born of precision, courage, and brutal necessity. Stout's guns fell silent. Every round had been fired. The Hellcat was battered. The tail shuddered with every maneuver, metal groaning under repeated impacts. Warning lights flashed, and a thin stream of smoke marked a small hydraulic leak. His hands ached from gripping the controls, muscles tense, heart hammering, but the aircraft still responded. Barely. Below, the airfield had become a furnace. Flames licked across the tarmac, consuming every fuel drum, aircraft, and structure. The heat rose in a massive column, thick black smoke spiraling into the sky. Each explosion shook the ground, sending shrapnel scattering across the field. The inferno stretched from the northern row to the southern end, confirming that his second pass had destroyed every critical target. Stout eased back on the throttle, pointing the Hellcat toward the open ocean. Adrenaline gradually faded, replaced by the crushing weight of exhaustion. He had disobeyed direct orders, risked his life, and yet the stakes had demanded nothing less. Every decision he had made in those 8 minutes now carried the full moral and tactical consequences. The USS Hornet appeared on the horizon like a steel promise. The carrier's deck teemed with sailors ready for flight operations. Stout keyed the radio, voice steady but tense. "Aircraft damaged, requesting priority recovery. Possible landing gear malfunction." The carrier turned into the wind, raising the deck for landing. Stout descended, Hellcat sluggish under battle damage. One wheel refused to lock. Sparks flew as the plane slammed onto the deck, the impact bending metal and shaking the tail structure violently. Sailors dove to stabilize the aircraft, their eyes wide at the sight of bullet holes tearing through the fuselage, scorch marks from flying through explosions, and the shredded tail. Stout climbed down, soot covering his face, hands trembling but controlled. Officers swarmed, some with shock, others with fury, but he stood tall. He had disobeyed orders, yet in doing so had prevented a disaster that no one else could have averted. Every breath he took was heavy with relief, every glance at the burning field still etched in his mind. Within minutes, Stout was surrounded. The air boss's face was crimson with anger. The intelligence officer stared at him, disbelief etched in every line. The squadron commander oscillated between outrage and awe. They demanded answers. Stout spoke clearly, deliberately. The airfield wasn't abandoned. 40 aircraft, fully armed and fueled, were ready to strike the invasion fleet. "I destroyed them." He gestured to the reconnaissance photos spread across the deck. Officers leaned in, counting, recounting, staring at the blackened tarmac and twisted metal of 40 enemy planes. The realization sank in. One man, one aircraft, had done what seemed impossible. The photographs, the charred wreckage visible from the air, and the remaining debris all confirmed it. No bureaucratic delay, no reinforcements, just Stout, his Hellcat, and 12 seconds of gunfire that had changed the course of an entire operation. For a moment, silence hung on the deck. The gravity of what he had done settled over everyone present. The impossible had been made real, and the cost in courage and risk was almost incomprehensible. By dawn on September 13, 1944, the first rays of sunlight revealed a stark truth. Paleolu's northern airfield was nothing more than a smoldering ruin. Reconnaissance planes flew over, capturing photographs that confirmed every calculation Stout had made the day before. 40 enemy aircraft lay destroyed, fuel dumps cratered, and ground structures were reduced to rubble. Intelligence officers pored over the images, cross-referencing Japanese records and prior assessments. The initial report had been wrong. Paleolu was not abandoned. Command revised its estimate of Japanese air strength on Pelu. Instead of facing 40 enemy planes during the September 15th invasion, the Marines would now enjoy near-complete air superiority. Stout's unauthorized attack, carried out alone in a single Hellcat, had changed the operational picture overnight. What had begun as a simple reconnaissance mission had transformed into a pivotal tactical strike, saving potentially hundreds of lives before the Marines ever set foot on the beaches. The implications were enormous, and the officers in the Hornets' briefing room could barely believe what had been accomplished in just 8 minutes of combat. Despite the overwhelming success, Stout faced a looming threat. Disobeying direct orders could lead to a court-martial. Every officer in the chain of command could have disciplined him for taking independent action. Yet when senior commanders saw the photos and understood the consequences of inaction, they made a decisive choice. Stout was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor, rather than reprimanded. The citation praised his extraordinary heroism and aggressive fighting spirit, noting that his decision to engage superior enemy forces alone had directly saved American lives. In the tense days following the mission, Stout remained modest. "I saw planes that needed destroying, so I destroyed them," he would later say. He never sought attention or glory. Historians, however, would calculate that his bold action likely saved hundreds, perhaps 1,000 Marines during the first hours of the invasion. The moral calculus was clear. The right decision sometimes meant breaking the rules. Stout's courage, judgment, and willingness to trust his own assessment under pressure became a benchmark for military strategy, demonstrating that rigid adherence to orders is not always the path to victory. High above Paleolu, Stout reflected on the choices he had made. Every move over the airfield had been precise, every burst of machine gun fire timed to exploit the enemy's vulnerabilities. The Japanese had packed their aircraft too tightly, leaving fuel drums exposed like tinder waiting for a spark. One perfectly placed round was enough to start a chain reaction that consumed entire rows of planes. Tactical brilliance in 8 minutes, more effective than an entire squadron could have managed. The Pacific stretched endlessly below, blue and calm, hiding the chaos Stout had just unleashed. His mind replayed each explosion, every fleeing crew member, every tracer that had zipped past his canopy by inches. The calm above contrasted sharply with the inferno below, a vivid reminder that war was both precise and chaotic. Measured in seconds and inches, at 28 years old, Stout had already flown 63 combat missions. He had survived storms that grounded other pilots, strafed fortified positions under heavy fire, and engaged in dogfights with nimble Zeros that could turn on a dime. But nothing in his experience compared to the split-second judgment demanded over Paleolu. The stakes were enormous. 28,000 Marines would soon land on the beaches, exposed to Japanese air attacks that could devastate their first waves. His training allowed him to spot weak points, act with precision, and escape danger. Combat was more than shooting. It was timing, observation, and nerves of steel. Stout's decisions weren't about glory. They were about life and death for him and for hundreds on the ground. Smoke rose in thick black columns, spiraling toward the sky, suffocating and relentless. Half the northern row of aircraft had been destroyed within moments, the southern bombers igniting in a second, meticulously planned pass. Ground crews ran in panic, some desperately trying to save aircraft, others diving for cover. Chaos, the kind Stout had imagined, unfolded perfectly under the flames and explosions. Each blast reminded him of the stakes. This was only one part of a much larger battle yet to come. The beaches, the ridges, the caves, every Marine would face a brutal fight. Yet the skies above were now, at least temporarily, under American control. Stout's calculated aggression had tilted the odds in the Marines' favor, and he felt the weight of that responsibility with every throttle adjustment. The Japanese anti-aircraft guns finally reacted, unleashing a storm of fire. Tracers crisscrossed the sky like deadly ribbons, 20-millimeter rounds shrieking as they tore through the air. Stout weaved with surgical precision, rolling left then right, never allowing the gunners a stable target. Every impact shook the fuselage. Warning lights blinked frantically across the cockpit, and smoke curled from minor leaks. Trees and terrain blurred beneath him as he executed split-second maneuvers. One miscalculation, one moment of hesitation, and he would have plunged into the jungle below, leaving the mission unfinished and the Marines vulnerable. Each turn, each dive, each burst of fire was calculated. Stout's life, the mission, and hundreds of lives hung in the balance. By now, Stout had used roughly half of his ammunition, the 650 caliber Browning guns spitting death with precision. Only seconds of firing remained. Yet the Southern aircraft still posed a serious threat to the invasion fleet. Hesitation was not an option. He calculated angles, distances, and velocity with practiced accuracy. Each trigger squeeze had to count. Each bullet had to hit its target to ignite fuel, puncture tanks, or destroy ordnance. The Pacific below was unforgiving, offering no room for mistakes. One misjudged maneuver, one missed shot, and the consequences could have been catastrophic. Stout's mind and body moved in perfect synchronization with the Hellcat, prepared for the final decisive attack. Diving low over the southern edge of the airfield, Stout unleashed the Hellcat's remaining firepower. Tracers tore through the morning sky, striking fuselages, puncturing fuel tanks, and igniting what had been a carefully packed row of Japanese bombers. He aimed precisely at a fuel truck and it erupted violently, the blast detonating nearby ammunition crates. Secondary explosions tore through the bomber's own ordnance, sending fragments and flames into the air. The inferno spread rapidly. Flames engulfed every plane, smoke twisted into thick, choking columns, and blackened debris littered the tarmac. Within seconds, the southern row burned as fiercely as the northern. The airfield, once a hub of Japanese power, had been reduced to a furnace. One man, one aircraft, 8 minutes of focused destruction, 40 Japanese planes decimated before they could ever threaten the Marines. Stout felt the weight of what he had done. The fire and explosions mirrored the calculations he had made before engaging. The gamble had paid off spectacularly. The roar of the Hellcat fell silent as his guns emptied. Every round had been fired. The aircraft, wounded and battered, fought against him. Control surfaces had been damaged by flak. Warning lights flickered incessantly, while a thin trail of smoke curled from a leaking hydraulic system. Yet the engine remained strong, propelling him away from the inferno below. Stout climbed higher, adrenaline gradually giving way to fatigue. His body ached, heart pounding in exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp. Below, the blackened airfield was a testament to what precision, courage, and rapid decision-making could accomplish. He had gambled his life on an audacious plan, and now the Pacific spread out in serene blue below him, hiding the chaos of the past 8 minutes. The USS Hornet appeared like a metallic oasis against the endless ocean. Stout keyed the radio. Aircraft damaged, requesting priority landing. Possible landing gear failure. The carrier turned into the wind, raising the deck for his approach. Stout descended cautiously, Hellcat sluggish and unpredictable after the battle. One landing wheel refused to lock. Sparks flew as the plane slammed onto the deck, bending metal and rocking the fuselage. Deck crews swarmed, astonished at the sight. Bullet holes tore through the body. The tail section was shredded, and the paint scorched black from flying through explosions. Every crew member stared at the Hellcat. Realizing that the pilot who had returned had faced unimaginable danger, survived, and brought back evidence of one of the boldest strikes in naval aviation history. As Stout climbed down from the cockpit, officers surrounded him immediately. The air boss demanded an explanation, eyes wide with fury. The squadron commander sought clarity, torn between protocol and disbelief. Intelligence officers examined him like a man returned from another world. Stout's report was concise, unwavering. The airfield was not abandoned. 40 enemy planes, fully armed and fueled, were destroyed. He gestured to the reconnaissance photos, blackened wrecks and burning tarmac visible in every frame. The room fell silent. One pilot, one aircraft, 8 minutes of fire, 40 Japanese planes gone before anyone could respond. The impossible had occurred, and Stout had single-handedly altered the course of the invasion. Officers could hardly comprehend the audacity and precision required to achieve such a feat. Weeks later, the Navy Cross citation arrived. Command recognized the extraordinary heroism of a pilot who disobeyed orders to save lives. Following procedure could have resulted in catastrophic losses during the first hours of the Marine landing. Stout's actions became a study in tactical brilliance, initiative, target prioritization, and calculated courage under fire. Yet Stout himself downplayed it. "I saw planes that needed destroying, so I destroyed them." He did not seek attention or praise. Historians later calculated that his audacious attack likely saved 500 to 1,000 Marines on September 15, 1944. His 8 minutes of combat had accomplished what a full squadron might have struggled to achieve, altering the course of the invasion and cementing his place in naval aviation history. Stout's story became a lesson in judgment, courage, and the difference one individual can make in the chaos of war. By morning, aerial reconnaissance planes circled above Paleolu, capturing images that told the full story. Burned-out Mitsubishi Zeros and Nakajima bombers littered the tarmac, their twisted fuselages blackened by fire. Fuel dumps had cratered, and hangars and support structures lay in smoldering rubble. The airfield that had once threatened the invasion fleet was now unrecognizable, a total ruin. Intelligence officers pored over the photos, cross-referencing Japanese records and prior assessments. The scale of destruction was staggering. 40 aircraft eliminated in under 10 minutes by a single pilot in one Hellcat. Command revised its intelligence on Japanese air strength immediately. The threat that could have decimated the first waves of Marines was gone. Stout's 8-minute attack had shifted the operational picture entirely. A stark reminder of the impact one man could have in the chaos of war. September 15, 1944. The first landing craft carrying 28,000 Marines approached Peleliu under calm skies, unaware of the devastation that had occurred above. They faced entrenched Japanese forces, fortified positions along coral ridges, and caves that had been converted into deadly strongholds. Every yard of the beach would be contested with lethal force, yet above them, the skies were clear. The aircraft that could have strafed landing craft, bombed transport ships, and turned the beaches into a slaughterhouse were gone, obliterated by Stout. His audacious, unsanctioned strike had ensured that the Marines would face the island itself, not an aerial onslaught. Without his intervention, the first waves might have been cut down before even reaching shore. What made Stout's attack extraordinary was his tactical precision. He did not waste ammunition trying to destroy 40 aircraft individually. Instead, he focused on the critical vulnerabilities: fuel drums and ordnance, tightly packed and exposed. Each burst of fire was calculated to ignite a chain reaction, maximizing damage while minimizing risk to himself. Every attack run was carefully planned. Approach angles, speed, and elevation were all optimized to avoid anti-aircraft fire while still delivering devastating results. Modern fighter pilots study his methods to this day, learning that one perfectly placed strike can accomplish more than dozens of indiscriminate shots. Stout's approach combined planning, instinct, and the ability to adapt instantly under extreme pressure. 8 minutes in a Hellcat, completely alone against a fully armed airfield, tested every ounce of Stout's courage. He weighed risk and reward with razor-sharp precision. One wrong move could mean destruction of his aircraft or his death. Yet failure to act could result in hundreds of Marines slaughtered during the first landing wave. His decisions reflected experience, training, and instinct. Hesitation was lethal. Stout had flown close air support at Tarawa, engaging fortified positions and dodging nimble Zeros, but nothing demanded this level of judgment in mere seconds. His bravery was measured and deliberate, not reckless. He acted decisively, knowing that the lives of thousands depended on his ability to execute perfectly. Stout had made a choice that most pilots could never have considered. He directly disobeyed orders. Reconnaissance protocol was unambiguous. Observe the airfield, take photographs, return safely to the USS Hornet. Engagement was strictly forbidden unless absolutely necessary, and certainly never solo against a fully armed enemy airfield. But Stout understood something that paperwork and procedure could never capture. The larger mission, the real objective, was to protect the Marines landing on Peleliu. He had only seconds to assess the situation. The Japanese airfield was alive with activity. Rows of Mitsubishi Zeros and Nakajima bombers, fully armed, fueled, and ready. Ground crews moved frantically, stacking ammunition and preparing planes for a massive sortie. Following protocol meant flying back to report, waiting for a strike package to form, and risking that the Japanese would disperse their aircraft, or worse, launch them against the vulnerable landing force. Every minute of delay could cost hundreds of lives. Stout's judgment called for action, not obedience. By trusting his instincts and training, he calculated the risk, understood the vulnerability of the enemy setup, and realized that a single well-aimed strike could neutralize a massive threat. His decision embodied the military principle of commander's intent over rigid instruction. The mission's goal mattered more than the letter of the orders. As he dove low over the tarmac, guns blazing, Stout carried the weight of thousands of Marines in his mind. Every pull, every burst of fire, every evasive maneuver was guided by the knowledge that the alternative, strictly following procedure, would lead to bloodshed. He wasn't reckless. He was decisively, methodically courageous, balancing danger with opportunity. By acting independently, Stout ensured that victory came from the air before the landing craft even touched the sand. He destroyed 40 enemy planes in 8 minutes, an act of daring that no squadron could have matched in the same time frame. The lives saved that day were a direct result of his willingness to take calculated, decisive action, a lesson in leadership, responsibility, and moral courage that resonates in military training even today. In essence, Stout's defiance was not rebellion. It was the highest form of service, where judgment, insight, and responsibility outweigh blind adherence to rules. In those critical minutes, the difference between following orders and understanding intent became a matter of life and death, and Stout chose wisely, altering the course of history in a single, heroic decision. Historians later calculated the full weight of Stout's solo strike. His audacious 8-minute attack likely prevented hundreds, possibly 1,000 Marine casualties on the very first day of the invasion. The northern airfield had been obliterated before the invasion fleet even reached Palau, leaving the Japanese with no ability to strike. A full squadron of bombers might have struggled to achieve such results, especially with the need to coordinate targets and avoid friendly fire. Stout's initiative demonstrated the extraordinary power of a single, decisive action. One pilot, one Hellcat, 8 minutes, yet the impact on the Pacific campaign was monumental. Strategists later cited the attack as an example of how timely, independent action at the tactical level can shape strategic outcomes. Weeks after the mission, the Navy Cross citation finally arrived, formalizing what those aboard the USS Hornet had already realized. Stout had acted with extraordinary heroism, taking a single Hellcat against a fully armed airfield and destroying 40 Japanese aircraft in 8 minutes. The language of the citation highlighted not just his skill as a pilot, but his judgment, audacity, and decisive action under extreme pressure. Command recognized that his initiative had directly saved hundreds, possibly 1,000 Marines, and had altered the course of the invasion before it even began. The lesson was clear: rigid adherence to orders, without understanding the intent behind them, could have resulted in disaster. Stout had been sent to photograph the airfield, to report, not to engage. Yet by reading the situation, analyzing vulnerabilities, and acting with courage, he embodied the principle of commander's intent, understanding the goal of a mission and taking responsibility when circumstances demanded bold action. His attack immediately became a tactical case study. Naval and Marine training programs dissected every aspect of his strike: how he identified the critical fuel drums, the way he sequenced his passes for maximum effect, how he minimized exposure to anti-aircraft fire, and how he escaped despite severe damage to his aircraft. Instructors used his example to teach new pilots that initiative, situational awareness, and calculated risk-taking often outweigh strict procedural obedience. Beyond tactics, Stout's legacy was also moral and philosophical. It illustrated the rare balance between courage and prudence, daring and discipline. Modern military leaders study his decisions to understand how judgment under pressure can have strategic consequences far beyond the immediate battlefield. Even decades later, Stout's story continued to resonate. In military aviation circles, he was cited as an example of what one individual, equipped with training, instinct, and courage, can achieve in a matter of minutes, changing the fate of thousands and proving that leadership is often measured not in following orders, but in knowing when to act decisively on one's own judgment. After the war, Stout returned to California, leaving the chaos of the Pacific behind. He rarely spoke of the Paleolu mission. His family knew he had served. But the full story of 40 enemy planes destroyed in a single sortie remained hidden for decades. The Navy Cross sat quietly in a drawer, a silent testament to courage few could comprehend. Friends remembered him as humble, uncomfortable with praise or attention. He never sought to embellish the story. When asked about the attack, he would say simply, "I saw planes that needed destroying, so I destroyed them." Extraordinary heroism performed quietly, with a singular focus on duty and consequence rather than recognition. Stout's attack remains a pivotal case study for modern pilots and military strategists. His mission illustrates that initiative over orders, rapid assessment over bureaucracy, and decisive action under fire can outweigh conventional procedure. The engagement teaches that situational awareness, critical thinking, and courage are often more valuable than simply following instructions. Instructors emphasize that rigid adherence to protocol might have allowed Japanese planes to disperse or attack the landing forces, causing devastating casualties. Stout's ability to assess, act, and retreat safely remains a blueprint for decision-making in high-stakes environments. One man, one aircraft, 8 minutes, 40 planes destroyed. Potentially 1,000 lives saved. Cowboy Robert Stout's actions at Paleolu exemplify the highest form of military judgment. Understanding the commander's intent, seeing the situation on the ground and acting decisively, even at great personal risk. The Marines who stormed Pelu never knew that their skies had been cleared by a single Hellcat pilot. Yet his legacy lives on in every tactical training program, every study of initiative and battlefield decision-making, and in the enduring lesson that calculated risk can save lives. Stout's courage, judgment, and quiet heroism remind us that in moments of crisis, the right choice is not always the one written in orders. It is the one dictated by reality, responsibility, and the courage to act.